Good morning. My name is Kelly Clark. I'm Amy Wicks was supposed to be talking, but she had something come up, so I'm filling in for her. I'm a civil engineer working on the Babcock Ranch property, and prior to that, I've been working on the Babcock Ranch for about a year and a half. Prior to that, I was working mostly with water resources engineering projects, so wetland restoration, regional stormwater treatment facilities, water quality modeling, and hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. And why it was such a good transition to go from that to the Babcock Ranch property is how important the water resources are to Kitson and Partners and what an emphasis they place on that. And so it was a very smooth transition for me. So a little bit of the ranch history. In 1914, Edward Babcock purchased the Crescent B Ranch and renamed it Babcock Ranch. And it was a 91,000 acre ranch. And in 2006, Kitson and Partners acquired that land, the full 91,000 acres. That same day, they closed a deal with the state of Florida and Lee County, and with that, they preserved 74,000 acres of land. And so that provided Kitson with about 17,000 acres for development. So when Kitson purchased the land, the existing land uses, a lot of it was silviculture, agriculture, cattle ranching, hunting, and mining. And these land uses are still going on today on that 17,000 acres and will continue until development occurs. So a little bit about what ag does from the water quality aspect. Since I'm water resources engineer, that's kind of my take on this. So Harvey Harper developed calculations for the state of Florida, and what those look at is runoff coefficients and also runoff concentrations based on land use. And so what we find is agriculture has large runoff coefficient or concentrations for total nitrogen and total phosphorus. That's the TN and TP. And that makes sense. That's fertilizer and cattle, manure. So another aspect that how farming impacts the water resources is, and it was kind of I was looking for some aerials that showed the ditching through wetlands to drain the wetlands. But what I found, I was going back to the 1950s and 1940s, and a lot of that had already occurred on the land. So it was very hard for me to find those aerials. So in looking at that, the channelization occurred to drain the land so they could actually get to it to farm the property. In what I did find is you can see between these 1950s aerials and then 1999 is some of the ag fields that were added. And so what that does, you can kind of see an example of it here. Here's a wetland that has been ditched around as well. And so the ditching of it, what happens is that water leaves the land faster. So instead of being retained on the land, it's now getting out and outfalling faster. So between the additional nutrients being added and the outfall that's occurring, you're getting more, the water quality has more pollutants and it's getting downstream at a faster rate. So what does that mean for the Babcock Ranch property? Well, when they laid this out, it's for the 17,000 acres. A lot of times when you're developing land, you'll just do it in phases, and you'll go into the water management district and you'll meet whatever design criteria is required. Well, that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to look at it holistically. So what can we do over the entire property to look at the water quality, water resources management? And so when they laid out these development areas, and you can see them in yellow, the development pods, we looked for areas that were already disturbed. So we were going in and going to develop on those areas that were already disturbed. For the areas that were more, had more wetlands, we were able to preserve those. And so you end up with these more tightly packed development areas, and you can see a large portion of the property will not be developed. So even of that 17,000 acres, we're able to preserve that. So we're working with nature. And one of the, the area to the east there is part of that 74,000 acre preserve. Also that area, there's kind of a neck there, and then the area to the west, that's another preserve. And one of the earlier projects, which is already complete, is where that's Curry Lake, where that outfalls. There's been a weir that's been placed. So before, that lake was just drained from ag practices. Now there's a weir that's been added, and that lake has come back, and now it's providing habitat. And that's over that entire area right there, which is really exciting. So just to get a little bit more into, this is from the conceptual permit that was over the entire 17,000 acres. And you don't need to see the details, but the idea is that we looked at the drainage, how it drained over the entire site. And so one thing that was looked at is in South Florida Water Management District, they look at discharge rates. So how much can you discharge off your site? We set discharge rates over the entire property that are lower than what is there today and gets closer to what was there naturally even before ag practices. Another thing is water quality. So what can we be doing over the entire site to not just get the water to one stormwater treatment pond or lake and then out, but to one and then to another and then to another and then to a created wetland or filter marsh and then out. So we're able to look at the entire property to provide the most water quality enhancement. Another thing that was done is those Harvey-Harper calculations I talked about earlier. That was done over the entire site as well. So we looked at all of those calculations for the entire site to make sure that we had significant reduction in pollutants, and also now we're discharging water slower, so you're getting back to more of those natural conditions. So as the engineers on this project, and why this is a really exciting project for us to work on, is we're encouraged to use low impact development. And what that means is development that you're not just going in and paving it, getting all your water to that one stormwater pond and then out. We're placing rain gardens throughout the entire site, and that provides treatment for those smaller storm events. So in a large storm event, a hurricane, let's say, the rain garden's designed just to let that water out and get to the lake and then, to the other lake, and then out. But because that's where the volume is, it can store that larger storm event, so we're not flooding the communities. But for those smaller storm events, we're in Florida, so those rain showers that happen every day, we can get that first flush of water to the rain gardens, and it can settle the particulates out before it gets into the lake. So we're able to reduce or improve water quality even before it's getting to those lakes. Same with bioswales. So rather than in a normal a development we see commonly, you get the curb and gutter that gets you to the pipes, which then gets you to the lake. We're able to provide bioswales for the conveyance, so it's actually settling that particulate out, and again, improving the water quality before it even gets to those lakes. Another large aspect of the Babcock Ranch is nature trails throughout the entire 17,000 acres. And so those nature trails will provide an amenity for the community, but it will also provide as education. And it's not just education in that there's something they're teaching, but also it's making the community get out and get into nature to realize why it's so important to preserve that, and learning about those wetlands and things that we're trying to preserve. A little even more, it's a whole sustainable community, so they have a 400-acre solar field site that will power the entire community. So that will power the entire 17,000 acres when all the development is done. Throughout the community, there will also be electric charging stations for electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles that you can call, and they can come and pick you up and bring you to those town centers. And something I didn't really mention before, the development pods are created in such a way that you get the residential around those town centers, so that you're promoting bicycling and walking and things rather than, taking your car a long distance away. And something else that isn't quite so obvious with the autonomous vehicles is not only is it reducing CO2 emissions, but it's also reducing the amount of additional parking you need. And again, that's less impervious, which goes back to the water quality piece of it. So kind of just to reiterate here, in doing the calculations, the water quality calculations across the entire site, what we're doing is we're treating the water, we're improving the amount of reducing the amount of nutrients coming off of the entire land area significantly. We're slowing down that water, which is, again, better for overall, and you get that lower peak, which also helps downstream flooding and things like that. We're preserving and enhancing the natural system, which also creates habitat for wildlife, and then that is then able to be used to educate the public. And because this is an overall community, not only are you educating from the nature perspective, but educating about how to have a sustainable community. Thank you.
Have there been any recent sightings of Florida panther or Florida black bear in or on the preserves adjacent? And do you think plans for wildlife corridors coming from the south to the north will be integral at Babcock?
I will go back to real quick. So just on this, you can kind of see how there's see that neck kind of there, and then there's that large. Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, it's okay. That is a wildlife corridor right there, so that will not be developed, and it's able to get the wildlife from the east to the west there, and it's a large swath of land, and that's why that looks the way it does there. And Gary, do you have anything to add on the panther? Or I'm not sure on that one.
Hi, Gary Nelson with Kitson and Partners. The question was whether it was going to be restricted to all just typical subdivisions or would there be larger tracts. And the idea is that we'll start off with more customary residential tracts, but as we go out into the periphery over time, that we start with a town center that's more dense in the middle, then we have some villages that kind of surround it, then out on the periphery we'll have some hamlets, and then some of those we might have some of those larger lots, but it's a 25-year project, so it'll take a little while to get there. And then a question about the panther. We did have one panther sighting in the preserve in the actual piece that was set aside for that. So we have little cameras out there, motion-activated cameras that detect those. Any other questions?